On a warm Good Friday in the early 1980s, a lawnmower saved my father's life. Well, I'm not really sure whether to give the credit to the mower or the lawn or God or some cosmic stroke of luck. My uncle, my dad's brother, Ralph, his sons Gary and Alan had stopped by the house to ask my dad if he wanted to ride with them as they hauled a trailer to a nearby town. My father declined as he needed to mow the lawn. The train had made it a closed casket affair, and their wrecked truck sat on the back edge of our property for months afterwards. My dad was inconsolable but refused to have the truck hauled away. No one could understand why he wanted the damn thing. I was 9 years old and watched curiously as he would go sit in a chair and stare at the crinkled white Toyota. My mother assumed it was guilt and part of the grieving process. Spring turned into summer and the cicadas screamed us to sleep, though sleep was restless that season. The same dream every night. I'm barefoot in the backyard and the sky is a funny shade of emerald green. The wreckage draws me closer. Through the broken glass on the uncaved passenger side, I see a small girl that I assume is around my age. Her eyes are milky and white and she's eating something from the seat. Moths and butterflies, hundreds of them. Her hands and her face are covered in the iridescent dust and she moves in a jerky manner.
Happy Easter. I feel pretty in this dress.
That's all she ever said. I bet I had that nightmare 40 or 50 times over the course of 3 months. My father was starting to recover by August and he no longer sat in the yard staring at the truck. I stood outside when the men came to haul the truck away and my father looked at me and asked,
"Did you see her too?"
My husband and I have 2 kids, both boys, both still believing in things like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. My husband works at some big computer company place near the mall, and the boys and myself usually meet Daddy at his work during lunch. He treats us to lunch at the food court in the mall on weekends. My husband has Tuesdays and Wednesdays off. Our oldest son is 6 and in the 1st grade, and his younger brother is 2. The last weekend in March, I took both the boys to the mall to meet with their daddy for lunch. Signs were plastered all over the mall about having your child's picture taken with the Easter Bunny. Our youngest son nearly threw a fit about not meeting the Easter Bunny. We had time for our lunch, and that was it. As lunch was finishing, I told my husband that I wanted to pop into a store and check out these figures I collect, so we didn't walk together. My youngest son was still miffed about not meeting the Easter Bunny, but when I told him I wanted to surprise Daddy with a nice framed photo of his sons with the Easter Bunny, he was happy. The line wasn't horribly long. Most parents had gotten this out of the way at the start of March. The reason I hadn't is because I hate crowds. We did the same thing with Santa Claus as well. The kids got their picture taken with the bunny, and as I ordered a print and the frame, my youngest son screamed and my oldest yelled, "Let him go!" I looked at the bunny and he was not letting go. Now, I've had my share of costumed characters hold on to me, but this was not the silly, loving way that costume characters usually did it. He had a grip on my son, a scary, tight grip. My oldest son managed to get my youngest out of the grip, and we left with the photo. We piled into the car, and apparently I had been crying and didn't realize until my oldest asked why. I had flashes of John Walsh and his son, Adam Walsh, and told my kids that entire story. My youngest started to cry when he realized how easy it would have been for the Easter Bunny to take him. Later that night, around 6, my husband and I took our kids out to a Japanese-styled restaurant. When we were driving back home, my oldest looked out the window and said he saw the Easter Bunny. My youngest son burst into tears, and my husband got mad at our oldest son. He knew very well that those words would freak out his little brother, but he kept trying to get my husband and myself to believe he had seen the Easter Bunny. Of course we didn't believe him. We only believed he was trying to scare his little brother, a favorite pastime of his. The rest of the trip home was focused on him and not his older brother. That night, I made sure to explain to my older son that fear can be fun if it's all fake and safe, like a horror movie, but when fear is real, it's not so fun and safe like what happened today. He seemed very sorry and apologized to his little brother. We all went to bed happier than after dinner. That was until our oldest woke my husband and me up. He was crying. This was strange. He didn't normally cry. All we could understand was that the Easter Bunny was outside his window. My husband took him back into the room and screamed for me. I ran. Judging by my husband's voice, it sounded urgent. The window was open and our youngest was gone. No blood in the bed, just gone. We all ran into the backyard to see if we could find any clues. All my husband was able to find were big footprints leading to the side of the dusty hill. The following year, this year, my oldest, my only child, has complained of seeing the Easter Bunny waving at him. I woke up this morning to the sound of giggling coming from the living room. Crap, I grumbled. Groaned Clara. We forgot to set the alarm, I said, looking at the bag of Easter chocolates in the corner. We still needed to set up the egg hunt. Clara rolled over and mumbled, Well, tell the kids the Easter Bunny got held up. Busy racing a turtle or something. Someone had to do damage control, and I could tell Clara wasn't going to get out of bed anytime soon. I tried to go in for a kiss, but when I saw the dried saliva crusted around Clara's mouth, I changed my mind. Besides, she was already snoring by the time my face reached hers. Sighing, I left my cozy blanket and reached for yesterday's jeans, which were lying unceremoniously in a pile of dirty clothes next to my bed. As I stuck my legs clumsily through the openings, I noticed the clock said 3:16 a.m. My kids were never up that early, even on Easter. I turned to my wife. Babe, you're the best, I said in a mock feminine voice. Thanks for taking care of it, you sexy thing. Okay, I might have been a little irked at her. As I was about to exit the room, I heard a sound outside my door. At first, I thought it was David's padded Cookie Monster slippers, but the taps were followed by a clicking sound, not unlike that of a dog's nails hitting the linoleum floor. I hoped the kids hadn't let the neighbor's flea-infested mutt inside again. I'd deduct half their Easter chocolate if that was the case. I knelt down and peered under the door to try and confirm my suspicions without letting the dog in. Fleas in the bedroom? No thanks. What I saw made me do a double take, which resulted in me slapping my cheek against the floor. It was no dog, that's for sure. The animal had elongated black feet, half covered in black patchy fur, half blistering dark skin. On the edge of its bony toes were long claws clicking against the ground. What the fuck is that? I said. My words carried through the paper-thin walls and startled the creature. It hopped out of sight, and I could hear it tap-tap-tapping all the way down the hall. Meanwhile, the turbo engine snores continued behind me, unperturbed. I sat on my rump in stunned silence, wondering what kind of mangy animal had found its way into my home, and how it had managed to do so in the first place. Judging by the size of its feet, it couldn't have made it through the cat's door, unless it was a raccoon. Those jerks could get in anywhere. I was trying to come up with a plan of attack when I heard the kids giggling again. A pang of panic zapped through me like one of those prank handshake buzzers. The kids weren't safely tucked away in their beds. They were out there with God knows what filthy beast had snuck inside. I grabbed the bat my wife kept on her side of the bed and dashed out of the room. A warm and wet substance was waiting for me on the other side of the door, which I only noticed after stepping in it. Cringing, I looked down, hoping it wasn't another furball. The floor was covered in a thick brownish liquid, and my first thought was blood. I could see it leading all the way down the hallway. Either it belonged to the creature or one of my kids was bleeding profusely. Both options terrified me, especially since wounded creatures tend to be more violent. I prayed David and Becky were all right. Sidestepping the streaky liquid, I ran towards the living room. "Becky! David! Are you okay?" I shouted in an alarmed tone as I rounded the corner. It took me a few moments to take in the scene, and I did so in multiple stages. First, I ignored the creature entirely, scanning the kids for any injuries. Next, I tried to figure out if they were in any immediate danger, say, about to get mauled by a rabid mountain lion or something. Finally, I searched for the animal I had spied from under my bedroom door. The kids seemed fine and happy. Nothing was actively moving towards them, and the creature was... oh God. David was sitting on that horrid thing. The monster loosely resembled a hare, but it was far from an adorable woodland creature. Since it was seated, it was hard to gauge its exact size, but if I were to put a number to it, I'd say it was about 4.5 feet tall. It emitted a strange and powerful odor, like chocolate laced with vinegar. The scent was so strong it made my eyes water. Its body was grotesquely lean, like a starving animal in the middle of winter. Its fur was patchy, rigid, and looked to be covered in melted chocolate. The substance dripped off at the ends of its twisted whiskers and seemed to perpetually ooze out of its mouth. Its 2 buck teeth were rotten and chipped. Its ears looked mangled and were gnarled off at the ends. Its eyes were the worst, though. You know those creepy sugar eyes on Easter chocolate animals? That's exactly what they looked like. Soulless, unblinking, cartoonish eyes. David was sitting on the thing's lap. He had a big grin on his face, petting along its disheveled, gooey fur. His fingers made the sound of a slug racing down a slip and slide.
"Look, Daddy, the Easter bunny's here,"
said David. Becky reached a hand to pet the thing's decrepit form.
"He's so soft,"
she chirped. Something told me they weren't seeing the grotesque figure for what it truly was. I knew my kids. The sight of a cartoon monster could give them nightmares for weeks. There was no way they'd be so calm if they realized what they were playing with. "Becky, David, come here," I told them as calmly as I could.
"But Daddy, we're playing with the Easter bunny,"
answered my daughter. I held my hands out to my children, trying my best not to let my growing panic show. I didn't know what the beast would do if it sensed danger, and I didn't want to freak my kids out. The rabbit's head turned towards me, but it was impossible to tell what those unfocused eyes were looking at exactly. It wrapped its short arms around my boy in a tight hug. I knew what it was thinking. It had no intention of returning my boy. My fingers tightened around my bat. "Becky Matilda Carter, come here this instant," I ordered, my voice stern this time. My daughter complied, but gave me a bit of a pout. I didn't care. I needed to get her to safety, even if that meant looking like the bad guy. The rabbit hissed in response. "Go to your room. Don't open the door unless it's me or your mom, okay?" I said.
"But, Dad,"
she protested. "Becky, now!" I barked. Head held down, Becky dragged herself down the hall. I waited while my heart thrashed wildly in my chest until I heard her bedroom door shut. For a split second, I felt relieved, but then fear came flooding back when I returned my attention to the Easter bunny. He was still hissing, chocolate syrup slowly drizzling along the top of my son's head. "David, sport, can you come here?" I asked, hoping he'd be able to squeeze out of the creature's bony arms. I took a step towards them, and The creature reacted by growling loudly and gripping my son tighter. David started crying. I stopped in my tracks, unsure of what to do. It was a standoff.
Daddy, you're scaring the Easter bunny. He won't give us any candy if you scare him,
pleaded my son as he continued to be pelted with more and more chocolate. That's not the Easter bunny. Come here and we'll talk about it. Oh, okay? I requested, spreading my arms out to my child. Daddy will give you more candy than Halloween and Easter combined. Oh, okay? David smiled and tried to get off the rabbit. The creature went absolutely wild, thrashing its head about in every direction while hissing and growling nonstop. Its thick brown saliva came flooding out of its mouth quicker than before, rapidly enveloping my son. I had to do something, but footsteps behind me caught my attention.
Daddy, is the Easter bunny sick?
Asked my daughter, tears in her eyes. I think she was seeing the same thing I was. I didn't have time to scold Becky for coming back. In the moment it took for me to turn towards her, the creature managed to fully encase my son in a thick veil of melted chocolate. I could hear him gurgling and gagging as it quickly hardened around him. "Let go of my kid, you son of a bitch!" I screamed, running towards the creature. My whole being cried out for an unrestrained act of violence. No one messes with my kids and gets away with it, after all. I reared the baseball bat back and ran forward to swing at the creature. As I approached the monster, something strange happened to me. In an instant, all the anger seemed to evaporate from my soul. The sounds of my son gurgling, the creature hissing, and my daughter crying all disappeared. I could hear the chirps of spring birds and what sounded like a pleasant stream in the distance. In front of me stood a large, soft white bunny with a basket full of eggs. I felt calm and at peace. If it wasn't for the fantastic force of physics known as inertia, I might have fallen victim to the illusion. As luck would have it, however, my action was already being executed and my swing successfully followed through, striking the creature square across the head. An unearthly crackle echoed in my living room. My stomach twisted with worry. Hopefully, I hadn't hit my son by accident. The next thing I knew, the bunny and its devilish counterpart were gone. In its place was a tall, hollow, and headless chocolate bunny. David was still encased in a cocoon of chocolate, but I quickly freed him while my daughter sobbed nearby. Thankfully, he was okay. I held him in my arms as though cradling a baby, feeling overwhelmingly grateful that both my children had survived. Once we had all calmed down, I started cleaning up the mess. In the corner of my living room, I found a pile of crushed chocolate, which I knew was the rabbit's head. The thing that really got to me were its eyes. You know how I said they were solid sugar? As much as they creeped me out when they were attached to him, they managed to completely horrify me when I found them lying amidst the rubble. I wasn't looking at fake candy eyes anymore. I was looking at appalling, stomach-turning, biologically accurate round eyeballs, just like the ones in a high school science class. Now, I can't say for sure whether what I saw was the real Easter Bunny or some sort of demon masquerading as him. Either way, I don't think I'll ever eat Easter chocolate again. Not now that I know what it's made of.